parents were stressed and harassed, but at the weekends, they'd go out with their gang of friends to a pub. And this was back in the days when kids weren't allowed in the pub. So there'd be maybe a converted shed, old skittle alley, and maybe someone had put some board games in there for us, or if we were lucky, a TV with some cartoons. And we'd be handed our bottle of pop and our packet of crisps, and we'd be sent off to play with the other kids. But it's not the other kids I remember. It's watching my parents transform, moving from those harassed, stressed people that I got to live with at home to people who were suddenly relaxed with their gang, with their tribe, in places where they belonged, where they laughed and they joked, celebrated, cried occasionally, definitely argued, because there was a lot of putting the world to rights. But they were nurturing their relationships, and they were free to be themselves. And two things occurred to me. One, this is what it is to be an adult. And two, this is the magic of hospitality. And so, of course, I wanted in. I was only 9 years old, so it took me another 9 years, really, before I could get my dream job. So I was 18, went off to university, got a job in a pub in Manchester, massive student pub, doing, what you do in a massive student pub. But actually, in my holidays, I got a job here, which is Foxton Locks in Leicestershire. So I'm from Leicester, and everyone in Leicestershire and Northamptonshire and everywhere, all of the areas around there knows this place, because it's, I think, I'm going to say this and be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure, I used to tell people this all the time, it's the longest flight of single locks on the British Canal. So it's a daytime day tourist spot, and everybody goes there. So people come together, they get the family together, they meet up with friends, they park in the car park, they walk up and down the locks, they go to the ice cream shop, and then they go to the pub and sit in the pub garden, and they watch the canal and the boats go by. And my parents were absolutely no exception here. So this is one of their favourite places, and so it became one of my favourite places. And so as soon as I could, I got a job here. And so the whole time I was at university, every summer I worked here. And it really felt like an absolute privilege, because in the mornings we'd arrive, all of us, and we would take great care to make the pub absolutely perfect for the visitors. So that included, polishing the brasses every single day. And this is a canal pub, so you can imagine wall-to-wall horse brasses everywhere. There was a lot of brass to polish. But we took real pride in doing that. And then we'd open the doors, and throughout the day, waves and waves of tourists would come in. And we worked closely as a team in order to make sure that their experience of the pub was special, because to every single person that came through that door, that day was special to them, and we were part of it. And then the sun would go down, and the tourists would leave, and then the locals would arrive. Because at the bottom here, there's a basin, and in that basin, there's people living on the boats. And during the day, those people leave and go off and do their busy, stressful, responsible jobs, and then they come home in the evening, and then they'd all come and trickle in through the day to take over their space in the pub, to share their day, to laugh, to cry. These people definitely, lots of arguing. It's you could have a soap opera set in this place. But they would be taking over this corner of the pub, and it really felt like they were taking back possession of their place altogether. And so it was really special. Anyway, time moves on. I left university. I did a physics degree. had nothing to do with hospitality, but I pretty much very quickly decided it wasn't for me. What I really wanted to do was continue in hospitality. So I left university, went off, did lots of other things. Did some fine dining in France, a ski season, worked in some hospitality places down south, ended up back in Leicester where I'm from, and brought my boyfriend with me who had met at university also doing physics, but who had decided that what he wanted to do was pursue a career in fine dining, because it turned out that actually being exceptionally good pastry chef and sort of Michelin star work was kind of sort of a similar kind of precision and detail he'd sort of been doing our physics degrees at university. So in his head somehow it made sense. Anyway, so he was working in a local Michelin star restaurant, being an apprentice, working ridiculously long hours, probably not being paid, because that's how we all learnt in the industry back then. When I was working in a pub, 80-hour week, coming home with less than 120 quid a week or whatever it was. And so we were setting up home together for the first time. Couldn't afford a sofa, but what we were doing was putting our money together, and when we could, going out and having special experiences in fine dining restaurants, because this was our hobby. And it was just, we were young, and it was just so much fun to get dressed up and go out for these mini special occasions and be, you know, be treated with these really high standards and all this care and attention you get in those environments. And it occurred to me, why are those experiences saved for just these spaces? Why isn't this much more ordinary? Because this is the late 90s, and as anyone will know, in the late 90s, if you went to a pub and ordered a glass of wine, you were probably, you weren't going to get anything that was very drinkable. And certainly if you went for a gin and tonic in a pub, you'd be lucky if you got Gordon's. It would come in a little stubby glass, which was probably still hot out of the glass washer, unlikely to have any ice in it, and if you wanted some lemon, you'd have to ask for it. So service standards it wasn't easy to get good service and good standards in hospitality at that time. So I thought, actually, why not? And so my boyfriend and I and another friend from university decided that we were going to open the perfect place. Now, as it turned out, our friend from university was working down in London, so he wasn't doing very much of the work, and my boyfriend was still apprenticing in a Michelin star restaurant, so he wasn't doing very much, so pretty much it was me. And I decided that what I was going to do was open the absolute perfect place for me. And so it's the late 90s, this is it, although this is a little bit further on, but the fashion was very steel and chrome, wood, leather, but all our standards were so high, so it was spotlessly clean at all moments, everything. And the standard was a table was cleared instantly the second somebody finished a drink, and we even would do table service. When we first opened, we were tiny, but even in that small space, we were doing table service. And if the ashtray had 2 cigarette butts in it, we'd change it immediately. I mean, it's no surprise that we all smoked at that time. If you're in this industry, there's no point being a non-smoker, the amount of passive smoking you were doing. But yeah, and so all of our products were the best we could get. So I would go down to London, I'd go to a trade show, I would find a great supplier of some great products and bring them back to this little bar in Leicester. So if somebody came to our bar and they said, can I have an Archers and lemonade, which was very fashionable in the late 90s, we'd say, I'm ever so sorry, we don't sell Archers, but here we have this amazing German schnapps, would you like to try it? And so, as I say, this is the place that I wanted to, it was my bar, it was something I really was exceptionally proud of. And then we'd magpied every idea that we'd sort of picked up along the way, the stuff that really worked. So, for example, in the toilets, we had speakers mounted into the ceilings that played Learn to Speak French. And there was so much fun in watching people come in for the first time, go to the toilet, and then watching them come out with these great big smiles on their faces. And we just had all these lovely quirky things that went on, all these little stories that we were able to create for people. But the night before I opened, I mean, it had taken me months to design this, to build it, to make it happen. And the night before we opened, I don't think I'd ever thought about marketing. I just thought, you know, this is what I want to do. This would be my place, and you know, it'll work. And anyone that's opened a place will know that night before is absolute chaos. I mean, there's dust everywhere. You're trying to get all your stock on the, you know, all your planning's gone out. You're just sort of chaotically working hard to make it happen. And my dad was there, and I turned to my dad and I said, what if no one comes? It's the first time it had actually occurred to me that I didn't know. I mean, I knew how to run a place, I knew how to design a place, make it look good, but how do I get people to come in? What if no one comes? And my dad just turned to me, and some of you will know this. This is Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams, and he just went, build it, and they will come. And I just thought, Dad, that is the most rubbish piece of advice. We're moving, yeah. But we opened the door, and they did come. So the property we'd selected was pretty much the only property we could afford. It had been a derelict butcher's, and it had been empty for 9 years. And it was in an area that had been kind of neglected in Leicester. But for that reason, the houses, we were surrounded by terrace houses, and the housing on there, but when we moved in, it was like you could buy a house for 15,000. I mean, 3 years later, that was more closer to 100,000. And I'd like to tell you that's because a really cool bar opened on the end of the street. I suspect, actually, we were on the crest of a wave. Because, like me, others exactly like me were moving into the areas. So these were people who'd just come out of university, or perhaps hadn't been to university, but they were young adults moving into the world of work for the first time. And they were setting up home on their own as young adults, trying to find out who they were, find their identity, you know, build these new friends and these new relationships. And we were open all day long, so we had a trickle of people come through all day long. But there was this, but then what used to happen was that on a weekday, every single weekday, at 4 o'clock, 4:30, people would start trickling through. These young people would start trickling through, and they would come and they would meet up with each other, because we became a beacon for them, this place where they would all congregate. And they started forming friendships, forming relationships, forming groups within there. And again, this is where they would laugh, they would share their days with each other. Again, a lot of putting the world to rights happens in these places, doesn't it? And yeah, so they were forming these friendships, forming these groups, finding those relationships that they wanted to build and nurture. And then collectively at 7 o'clock every single day, they'd all disappear because they'd all decided, oh yeah, I need to go and eat. And they'd all go home. 9 o'clock, they'd all start coming back again. And this is a pattern of how they were forming their friendships, how they were forming their groups. And as I say, and as it says here, we became these 4 walls on which their lives were painted, their early lives, their memories, these first relationships they were having as adults. And what occurred to me, stood there serving them, having the privilege of being part of their world, was this bar was no longer my bar. At some point, I don't know when, but it became theirs. It was their bar. Now, of course, time marches on, and they moved on. So a lot of them, you know, built relationships, had families, moved out of the area. So almost all of them now don't live in that area. They've moved out into different parts of the city, the county, some of the different parts of the world. And then, of course, I moved on as well. You know, after 10 years of this bar, I then went and did other things in the industry, pub, fine dining restaurant, festivals, events, lots of different adventures that I went on. But also the bar itself no longer exists. This is over 25 years ago. It's changed hands at least twice in that time. The whole area, the demographic of that area has completely changed. It looks different. It serves a different clientele. It doesn't exist anymore. But something fundamental does. Because what still remains are the memories, are the stories, and above all else, those relationships. So the thing is, and I'm very conscious I'm in the offices of accountants, but we talk in business a lot about our profit and loss, our numbers, our margins, our GPs, wage costs, all of those things. And they are absolutely essential. Of course they are. Because we are all in business. We all have to be able to pay our own way. We have to be able to satisfy our shareholders. We have to be able to pay our suppliers and support that wider community of businesses that are around us, and pay our team, and also go home and pay our own way. That's absolutely essential, and that's absolutely given. But too often we forget what actually is most important, because none of that happens without our customers. We need customers in order to have resilience and in order to have growth. Now, we can all get growth through spending money and getting more customers through the door, through our marketing campaigns or through offers and discounts. But every single time we do one of those campaigns, what we're really hoping for is that enough people will come through the door who will feel something. Feel enough to feel that this might be their place, that it is worth coming back again because this place is for them. Because the reality is that people buy with emotion and justify with logic, and that is for every single purchase, not just in hospitality and tourism. Even when somebody is purchasing a mortgage or an insurance policy, they can come up with pros and cons as to why they should purchase something or not purchase something, or which one's better than the other. But ultimately, that final decision, even for something like that, comes down to a feeling. Is this one right for me? And in hospitality and tourism, that is amplified hugely, because what we do in our industry is not serve food and drink or a night's stay or a day out. What we are really doing is creating these moments for people. And that is always a decision made with emotion and then justified with logic. Even a takeaway coffee, and inevitably it always ends up being an emotional decision. And collectively we know this as well. Everyone here is a customer as well. And we all know that we have our favourite places. And the places when we have a visitor we want them to come and see, we want to take them to. Or the place where we go and tell other people about it because it was so great. And we tell them about the story of when we were there and how wonderful it was and why they will like it. We all have those places. And collectively, as a society, we know how important this industry is. And we are emotionally connected to it, and it is why we call it the Great British Pub. But let's be honest. Hospitality industry is always in crisis. So in my book, I write about the last 1,000 years of only briefly. I'm not going to go. I don't do the full history, but I talk about the last 1,000 years of hospitality in the UK, and I can promise you that over the last 1,000 years, it has been one thing after another that has challenged our industry. And certainly in the 30 years I've been doing it, it has been one thing after another. We had the banking crisis, we've had September 11th, we had the smoking ban, and I can't even count how many petrol crises there have been in that time. And every single one of them has created challenges amongst all the other things that have been going on. But the reality of our industry is that's where we sit in the economy. On the one side, we've got the supply chain. Anything happens there, it becomes a ripple that then amplifies and then hits us really, really hard. And then the consumers, anything happens in that ecosystem, and again, it ripples and amplifies and it hits us really, really hard. Because we sit absolutely on the cold face. And it's why our margins are so tight, and it is why our businesses are so complicated. Because we have to react in real time to everything. Other industries, in the main, have a little bit more insulation around what's going on in the world. Our industry doesn't really. It all happens in absolute real time. Now, the thing is, for some of us, actually, that's why we love this industry. The constant problem solving and the constant need for creativity and innovation. That's what attracts some of us to this industry. However, since 2020, I think it is fair to say it has been absolutely relentless. I mean, we all came out of lockdown thinking, God, it can't get worse. At least now we're going to get a bit of runway, and we're going to be able to consolidate, and we're going to be able to build, and we're going to be able to grow, and it's going to be fantastic. Well, I would say the 20s. And yeah, it's just not turned out like that, has it? But then on top of that, on top of the external stuff that we all know and we can all feel and we're all experiencing every single day, I think it is fair to say that the world's getting faster. That culturally we're changing faster, our customers are changing faster, our team's changing faster. And just in terms of tech and our digital world, it's all moving very, very, very fast, which is creating this constant feeling of crisis as well. And I think it breaks down into three different areas. So first, the team. Now, I said when I first started, I was working 80-hour weeks for £120 a week. These days, you're not going to get somebody to work much more than 40-hour weeks. So that's already at least 2 people to cover that. And you're going to be paying them at least 5 times as much. So that, on its own is a huge challenge. But also generationally, and I'm not saying it's Gen Z, but Gen Z have come into the workforce and they have changed the workforce. They've taught everybody else actually what to expect. And this attitude, there's a change in attitude. The attitude now is, or an understanding, that this is actually just a transaction. They come into work, they do the hours, and then they go home and they don't think about it. That's a change in an attitude to work. But then when they do come to work, they're expecting you to have, to understand that they know it's a transaction, you know it's a transaction. They might not be saying forever, but you need to care about their career progression and what they do next and engage in that. And also, they have a home life that you need to know all about, and you need to care about it, and you need to be actively engaged in it. And by the way, if they have a bad day, you need to sort it out and you need to accommodate them. These are changes. And I have to say, the other thing I was going to say is also they expect you to deal with toxic environments and to prevent harassment and bullying. Now, I'm not saying any of this. I think these are fantastic progress for as a society. I think this is fantastic. All of this is great. But the reality is, in the industry, it creates a huge number of challenges and difficulties for us to have to manage. Customers. Customers are more demanding and more discerning, absolutely, and there's lots of really good reasons for that. One of them is just simply, there's just so much more competition in this industry than there used to be. When I first started, there were about 100,000 hospitality businesses in the UK. Now it's much closer to 180,000. That alone means there's much more competition happening in the industry. But we're also competing with Netflix, we're competing with online gaming, and we're competing with M&S meal deals. At the same time, our customer is way more knowledgeable. When I first started and I had to go to London for specialist products in order to come and present them to my customers and say, hey, have you seen this wonderful new thing? Now it's not even just Sainsbury's that's serving it, it's everywhere. It's the Tesco's around the corner serving these specialist products. And then every single Saturday morning, for the last 25 years, you've had chefs on TV teaching people exactly what to cook, where to buy it, how to cook it, what it should look like and how it should taste. Now, it's not to say that people are staying at home and cooking, although some people are. But it does mean when they come out, they now know exactly what should be on their plate and how it should be. And they are not shy about telling you when you've got it wrong. Oh, sorry, I'm just about to skip on. But as I said, overwhelm. The other part is overwhelm. So if just the last two slides were not overwhelming enough, we also do have a greater admin burden than we've ever had. And also, of course, price increases mean our margins are harder to reach. But in all of that, there are still businesses that are thriving, that are still putting their prices up and still having queues outside the door. And lucky for you, I wrote a book on how they do it. And they do it by having a business that's based on these 5 pillars. And lucky for you, I'm just going to quickly tell you all about them. So if you're ready. Number 1 is setting high standards. So when we talk about high standards, we quite often talk about systems and checklists. And systems and checklists are really important in our industry because they help us train our teams, set expectations, and achieve that consistency. But too often, if we just say, okay, that's it, we've done that, and now we expect perfection, all we actually end up doing is creating this culture of fear in our organisation that people can't make mistakes and that they can't find innovative ways for dealing with problems. So setting high standards is not just about that. It is about having consistency, clarity and care. But above all else, it's about understanding that whilst everybody here, because we're in hospitality and tourism, will be a perfectionist, whilst perfection is something we should be aiming for, it's not necessarily what we should be trying to achieve. What we should be concentrating much harder on is just being really proud of what we do. So it's about us being proud of what we do and our teams being proud of what they do. So pride, not perfection. And then we have stand out. Now, stand out sounds really obvious, but let me explain. Because the other thing about our industry is that we all want to please everybody all the time. Now, I can guarantee that every single member of your team, every single customer, every single member of your family, every single one of your friends has thought about owning their own place. Their own cafe, their own pub, their own restaurant, their own hotel, their own B&B, their own zoo even. And so they all have an opinion on how you should be running your business. And they will be telling you. And we're all people pleasers. So someone tells us an idea and we go, actually, you're right, that is quite a good idea. Oh yeah, and you're right, actually, it's not that difficult for us to do it because we already have these people in place. Oh yeah, okay, so right, yeah, we could do that. And so little by little, we do these little extra bits that weren't in our business plan, but yeah, we can do that. and we're pleasing lots of other little ideas, and we start smoothing down everything we're doing. But the problem with doing that is what you end up with is a business that everybody likes. And isn't that lovely? They like you. They come in, they like your business, and then they walk away and they forget about you. Instead of a business that people love, that they can't stop talking about. Because the reality is you can't please everybody. Not without huge compromise. There's 8.3 billion people on this planet. Now, this is a little thought experiment. You could, theoretically, make a cup of tea for every single person. And it would be hot and it would resemble a cup of tea. And they'd take a sip and go, yeah, it's a cup of tea. But what you couldn't do is make every single person a cup of tea that was absolutely the way that they love it. So you've got a choice. Are you going to be liked by a lot of people but easily forgotten? Or are you going to be loved by a few? Because those few people that come in and love you are going to be the people that walk in and say, this is my place, I just feel it, I know. Here's my place, here's my people, I get it, I know exactly what I know that piece of art on the wall, I know it. The music, oh wow, that's exactly what I love. And look at everyone else here, I could be friends with these people. And those people leave your business and they walk out and they say, and all they're thinking about is, when can I go back? Who can I tell about it? And so that is your choice. So in order to stand out, you need to know who are the customers that love you. And then define identity. So you know how you fell in love with hospitality, you know why you do what you do. You could probably ask your team and find out why they do what they do. But what you need to know is, why do you matter? Why do you matter to your customers? And we've established it's not about making money, although it is, but it's not about making money, and it's not about serving food and drink or overnight stays. So why do you matter to those customers? And once you know that, that's purpose. And once you have purpose, now you and everyone in your team is on a mission to deliver that purpose. And now your team are no longer in a transactional relationship with you, because what they do has meaning. And now every single decision you make in your business becomes simpler. I was going to say easy, but it's never going to be easy. But it's going to be simpler. Because now, every single time somebody comes to you with an idea or something comes across, you come across something, it's going to be, does that serve our purpose? Because if it does, let's explore it. But if it doesn't, I don't need to think about that anymore. Off the table. It simplifies it. And then build belonging. So we're in this exciting place. We've got customers who absolutely love us, and we've got a purpose. We know why we matter to those customers. So now every single detail in your business is designed perfectly to build that belonging. So now you know exactly what needs to be on your menu, exactly what price you're charging, exactly what products you're stocking, exactly what the decor is, what the feel is when you walk through the door, what the music policy is, what music you play, what volume you play it at, what temperature the room's at, what it looks like from outside, who your team are, who you're going to recruit into your team, how you're going to train them, what they're going to wear, and what language you're using to communicate with your customers. So how do we talk to our customers? And then beyond that, you now know which marketing tools will work for you, because you know exactly who they are. And then we're going to tell a great story. So we know how you fell in love, why you do what you do, why your team love what they do, who the customers are who love you, and what your purpose is and why you matter. On top of which you are 4 walls for other people to paint their lives on. So now you have a massive story bank. And the thing is that humans are absolutely wired for a story. It's how we emotionally engage with each other. Every single person here, except for those really cold-hearted ones of you here, but everyone else will have cried at a story. You'd have cried at a book or a film or TV. And when you're crying at a story, it's because you understand. It's because you're recognizing some understanding in that. That is emotional connection, and it's how all humans are behaving. And so telling those stories now you're marketing, you have your marketing tools, but your stories are all of your content. So those are the 5 pillars, but there is one more element. There's one more essential understanding. Because all of this takes great leadership. And the understanding of that is that you are the pebble. So from you, it spreads to the team. From the team, then to the customers. From the customers to that wider community, and from the community beyond into the people who've never even met you yet, the people who just hear about you. But all of that starts with you as that pebble in the pond. And so that pride, those high standards, the leadership, the energy, it all starts with you. So the most important part of any business strategy has to be you. Because without you, none of this happens. And after all, it's far too important. Your businesses are far too important to ignore that. Because we are the places where people find their belonging. We are the places that they come to build relationships and nurture relationships, to laugh, to cry, to grieve, to celebrate, to argue, to put the world to rights. We are those places. And in a world that is moving faster than it ever has, where tech and AI are becoming more and more prevalent, where we are becoming more and more isolated, this becomes even more important, because hospitality businesses are where humans get to be human. Thank you.